Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. My name is Azaria Sakinah Nixon, and now I will explain about elision and giving you the example. So elision means silent letter. Letter can be silent in pronunciation of some word. In most cases, whether or not a letter is silent depends on its relationship to the letter that is surrounded and the position of the letter in the word. So I will explain and give you some examples with rules where it is possible to give them. So the first is A. A is usually silent in-ically at the end of the word. For example, is præktıkli, spǝ'sıfıkli, and beisıkli. Next for B letter is B is silent in the combination and B at the end of the word. So for example is kǝom, thumb, and B is also silent in BT at the end of the word. So for example is daot, and satl. And the next is C letter. C letter is also silent in scle. C is also silent in scle at the end of the word. For example is muscle and corpuscle. The next is D letter. D is usually silent in this word. For example is hænsǝm, kaınıs, and wenzdei. Next is E letter. E is silent in the combination of scle before the E, I, and Y or at the beginning of the word. For examples is seen, sand, and science. A is usually silent in combination of s in the middle of the word. For example is descent, discipline, and fascinate. And also A is usually silent at the end of the word. And also A is usually silent at the end of the word, but not for example. It may be blue, true, and value. A can also be silent in the middle of some word. For examples is vegetable, evening, and camera. The next is G letter. G is silent in grey at the beginning of the word. For examples is gnome, knock, and nap. G can also be silent in gn at the end of the word. For examples is sign, design, and foreign. J, it is also silent in combination of gm at the end of the word. For example is diaphragm and flame. Next is gh or gh. Gh is both of G and H are usually silent in combination G in the middle of the word. For example is night, eight, and neighbor. GH can also be silent in combination GH at the end of the word. For example is hat, side, and taboo. The next is H letter. H is silent in RH at the beginning of the word. For examples is rhyme, rhythm, and rhinoceros. H is also silent in the GH at the beginning of the word. For examples is ghost, Jato, and chest. And H is silent in this word too. For examples is hour, school, and honest. The next is K letter. K is silent in GN at the beginning of the word. For example is knee, knowledge, and knock. Next is E letter. E is usually silent in the combination of alf, elk, olk, old, and olm. E in combination of at the end of the word, for example, is cough, half, and behalf. And combination alk at the end of the word is walk, talk, and stalk. Combination alk at the end of the word is joke and folk. And combination old at the end of the word is should, would, and could. In combination at the end of the word is calm, palm, and salmon. The next is N letter. N is silent in combination MN at the end of the word. For examples is autumn, column, and dam. The next is P letter. P is silent in the combination PS at the beginning of the word. For examples is psychology, psychic, and psalm. P is also silent in PN at the beginning of the word. For examples is pneumatic and pneumonia. And also P is silent in this word too. For example is cupboard, raspberry, and corp. The next is S letter. S is silent in this word. For example is island, isle, and debris. The next is T letter. T is silent in words ending stand. For example is listen, fasten, and moist. T is also silent in the word ending still. For example is castle, whistle, and thistle. And T is also silent in this word. Example is often, debut, and Christmas. The next is W or W letter. W letter is silent in VR at the beginning of the word. For example is a right, a rap, and a wrong. W is also silent in the combination at the beginning of a many word. For example is who, whom, and whose. All for me, thank you. Hope you guys understand. Wabillahi taufiq wal hidayah. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.